Hello, scale modelers. Alrighty, so I know it's been a while since I've had an update on the strut mod for the Eaglemoss Delorean. So, what you're seeing here, these are not completely secured in place yet. It was just so I could keep, putting everything together, checking to see how well everything fit. But I was finally able, with the help of having 2 weeks off paid vacation, so that really helped. Although I probably could have gotten more done if I didn't have to get my transmission rebuilt. So, yep. Alright. So, I got some measurements for the strut mod. Finally. Okay, so just like with the front shocks, you are going to need your 5mm hollow tubing, and you are going to need your 3mm hollow tubing, because these two sizes, if I get the right size, no, I don't got the right side, or maybe it's that side that's the wrong side. There we go. These go in and out perfectly fine. I usually take some sandpaper or even the Dremel or both and polish that down a little bit, so that way it works very, very good. No sliding issues. So seems to work really good. Okay. Alright, so with the 5mm tubing, alright, I cut this down to the final time down to 22mm. So, or I should say 22mm. And I usually leave it a little bit longer, so when you end up taking your tap here, and this is your M4 by 0.07 tap. Let me show you on this one. Because sometimes the threading doesn't actually start right away, so sometimes you can have anywhere up to, maybe 5mm that hasn't actually been started, because first it's cutting away metal so it can get to a spot where it can start threading. So there's that. Always leave extra material before you start threading. So always do the threading on the whole rod first, and then see how far down into the rod where you think it looks like it might have started, and small increments, like maybe start with I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch or maybe an 1/8 of an inch, whatever the equivalent is for millimeters on there, maybe 2 or 3mm. So cut it off there, recheck, see if you're close. If the threading is close to the end at that point, and you can actually take if you happen to have a screw with that exact threading for the tap already, put the screw in, see how, if it goes in a little further before you get to the threads, then you can actually cut a little bit more off. And that'll work. And once you have that, then you can cut it down to the final length. Alright, so then, okay, that's the 5mm. Okay, so here I have the original strut piece right here. And let's see. How far? I don't have. I don't think I have the original one up here. Oh no, I do. The one for the other side. All right, so I cut quite a bit off of there, as you can see. Quite a bit off, and I mean I'll show you what the piece I have now ends up looking like. But I cut off, always cut off extra. I mean, I could have probably cut it off right here, but because you're gonna need to take your die with your tool. I don't happen to actually have the tool up here, and this is the 4mm by 0.7 die, and when you cut it off, what you're going to end up noticing, just like in the front shock video, is it's a soft metal, so it might not actually start to do the threading, but because this is die cast, which is soft metal, you actually need to tap it slow. Otherwise, all the threading, when as you're threading, the threads that you actually are doing could end up breaking off. So you need to do it really slow. That's why I always cut extra off. Well, not extra, but I always cut it more material off than I need, so that's why that whole huge chunk is missing. I mean, that's at least like 15 to 20 millimeters right there that I cut off. So that way I made sure I had enough material to work with just in case some threading did break. But yeah, you gotta go really slow with the soft metal. Alright, so after taking care of that, the total length from the outside of what this is, yeah, and one other thing. If you're going to be using some sort of channel locks or pliers or something to hold this in place when you're doing your die cut, you might want to find like a piece of rubber or maybe piece of foam or something, so that way you don't mangle up the end. Luckily, I didn't mangle mine up too bad. I mean, it did kind of squish it down a little bit, but I did reinforce that end there with super glue and a little bit of JB Weld. So, alright, so where was I? So the final length on the outside is 10 millimeters, and there's at least 5 millimeters of material threaded inside of the hollow tubing. Oh, sorry, I threaded at least 5 millimeters into the hollow tubing. So there's at least 3 to 4 millimeters actually threaded inside of it. So, gives it enough. So, when you're threading that in, and you get to the end, and you can tell, yeah, it's good. It's good right there. You should be fine. For this part, I would not suggest using thread lock. I would actually, if you are going to use thread lock, use the high strength red thread lock. Screw it all in, and then put super glue around the seam where those two pieces meet. I also put a small amount of a JB weld up around the outside just to strengthen it even further. So it all seems perfectly fine. Alrighty. Alright, so basically the total length of the final piece when you cut it and do your die cut on it, and with the amount of material that's actually threaded inside of the hollow tubing, you're probably going to look somewhere between maybe 13 and 14 millimeters of length total. And that's, I measure from here, not this, just the tubular part. I measure from here. So you're going to have 10 millimeters from here to whatever happens to be on the outside, and then you're going to have 2 or 3 millimeters, 3 to 4 millimeters threaded inside the hollow tubing. So 13 to 14 millimeters. You can probably do 15 if you can get the threading right. Alright, so alright, then we get to the 3 millimeter hollow tubing. Alright, so with the 3 millimeter hollow tubing, final length is 22 millimeters. So it's the same length for the 5 as it is for the 3 right now. And I did originally tap it, and with this you do have to use a drill and slowly drill out small amounts of material, just so that way the hole is actually wide enough to accept the 2 millimeter tap. And 2 millimeter tap can easily break. The only thing is, after I tapped it, and for quite a few months, I was screwing and unscrewing the screw from the rod back here, and then just recently, I don't know what happened, but the screw no longer would go in and hold it firmly in place. So, and then to my surprise, which this is the rod right here, and if you notice, there's not an actual screw in here anymore. I had to use a bit of 1.6 millimeter threaded rod instead of a screw to make sure that this, when this gets put in here, it would actually have more strength to it. So, and that do have the 1.6 millimeter nuts to go along with that. So something else that ended up happening, the internal retaining ring for this one, I only had the one on, and apparently I didn't have enough super glue on it when before I put the JB Weld on here. So apparently that started sliding down. Don't ask me how. There was barely any force put on it, which, you know, honestly, that shouldn't have happened. So, and so I had to go back through, and I did start that in the 2 weeks that I did have off. These are 1/8 internal lock rings. So my front shock mod, I don't know where I got that one from at all, but it was a bigger, thicker. It was a thick one. I just happened to find it somewhere in the house. Might have even been under a couch cushion. I don't know if it could have been from like a hard drive or something that I had taken apart and was trying to check out to see if it had fried or anything. But I mean, it was like at least 5 years ago. But I mean, it was like one of the old style automotive retaining rings that you would have normally seen, or internal lock rings that you would have seen inside of a car to help keep, you know, like a screw in place. But these things are thin, and I mean, they are bendable, so yeah, 1/8 internal retaining ring right there. So I ended up using 2 of those, and I put a ton of super glue on this. A ton. So, and then also to accommodate the fact that I did not have the factory screw, as you can kind of call it, car factory screw, you know. I did have to use some of my little miniature washers. Got 2 different sizes right here. They are brass, but I mean, just as long as, you know, you don't have to screw the threaded rod down too tight, you should be good. I mean, as soon as I got this tight, I actually super glued the top one in place, and then I will eventually cut that the rest of that rod down even further. I can probably just use a snipper on that. I mean, it is brass. And then, so that way I can put this from below and this from above, and then put the nut in from the bottom here to then tighten it up to where I need it. Which, so far it has clamped down pretty good. This part right here has definitely clamped down pretty good. Oh, and as far as the internal lock rings, forgot to mention this, there are 4 tabs on here. So when I put them on, I made sure that, because you can see the openings right there, right? So when I put the second one on, I made sure that the other 4 were in with the openings, so that way they were, I had 8 little tabs keeping the strut shaft here locked in even better before the super glue. Alright, so we have that right there. What next? Okay. Oh, Where did I put it? Okay, so one of the other things that I ended up using, I got from my local Lowe's, as a matter of fact. It's an axle cap nut. And this is one of the things I used on the strut bottom to help keep the spring in place and sitting. You do have to drill out the top of this hole right here. You do have to, because seeing as you have to accommodate the 5mm tubing, and as you can kind of see, the opening down here is like 6 or 7mm. So if you take like a little punch or something with a sharp tip, and you can actually get it right in the middle, and then, you know, punch a small hole in there, you can actually take your small size, I'd say the titanium or the cobalt drill bits, and slowly switch out the different sizes and make it to the size that you need. So obviously, you know, American Standard, it was just at about the right size. The next size drill bit would have been too large, so I did have to take a file, a rounded file, and go a small amount around the edges. Very small amount. And it wasn't like loose getting it over the tubing. There was a tiny little bit of give. I'd say, you know, like maybe thousandths of an inch, or, you know, thousandths of a millimeter, you know, whatever the equivalent is. So yeah, so that's what that is right there. And then for that, over here, and then I got these. This is, I actually got off an automotive fastener site. The other ones I got off of just a regular fastener site, but this is a typical automotive fastener. Back in the day, these would have been thicker. I only needed to use one of these, and let's see, because I don't remember which way I ended up putting that on there. Okay, I think I ended up putting it on this way, and then I'll put it on here like that when I came right down to it. And something else I also did, I also filed down the edges of this, because this was just too big of a diameter for the spring, if you notice that. So I filed it down to be just a hair bit bigger than the outside diameter of the spring that I'm using. But this internal lock ring worked really well. Because that was actually supporting the spring during the up and down of the support with the wheel and suspension and all that. I put tons and tons and tons of super glue on it, and then I put JB Weld over the top of that. So that did take a little bit of time to do. Okay, and the spring, this is anywhere between a 10 and 15 pound spring, or PSI rated spring. so it can still support a ton of weight. I think the max is like 150 pounds or so, whatever the equivalent is for that. I don't remember what the specs they gave online were. So, alright. But, let's see here. Something else that you also need is the 2mm nuts, which I am starting to run out, and I still have to make the right front shock and the right rear strut here. I still have quite a few of the 2mm bolts here. These are 15 mils long, and 2mm threaded rod right here, because with what I'm doing with the wheels, I don't want the wheels, I think I mentioned this before, I don't want the wheels to flop down. I have taken the metal pegs out of all 4 spots, and I think I've taken the all 4 magnets out. So yeah, with what I'm trying to do, I need the threaded rod, and that's going to end up being longer than 15 mils. And also, when the strut goes in and the support, brake drum, rear disc, whatever happens to be when it goes through the rear knuckle and all that support suspension, you need longer than 15 mils for that. And you can see, oh, that one's upside down. Get that. Right there, top to bottom, if you can see through the bag. So this is actually, I think this is actually closer to 25 mils of length. So that's how long you will end up needing it, so that way you can put that in there and get everything attached. So, I mean, I know it looks a little rough, but I couldn't really sand down the JB Weld too well, because I only put like a very thin layer on it, and it you know, kind of caked up a little bit. Yeah, it had fallen on the floor. So, couldn't really file it down too much. So it is a bit rough looking, but I mean, once it's on the shelf, you know, nobody's really going to see it at all. And this is what I got. You know, I not only did I didn't really file it down too much, and then I bent these upwards, because I put the put the retaining ring on first, and after I got the hole in here for this, I measured a length down, so that way I had plenty of space. So there's 10 mil, should be 10 mils down from right here where I actually put this on here, and this is also super glued in place, so that's not going anywhere. And so after everything was, like, actually beforehand, because the retaining ring was put in when I got the height for this, and I ended up pulling this off, super gluing that retaining ring in place, put this back over the top of it when it had dried, and then I just rounded the edges up with the small pair of pliers, just bent them ever so slightly as another reason to help keep a spring in place so it doesn't just, try to fall off. And yeah, I know this whole center section would actually keep that from happening, but once I did that, I super glued this in place right on top of that retaining ring, and then I filed the edges off so that way it was a little bit smaller. So the bending it up and then filing it down a little bit actually makes it look pretty good. So, and you can see, I mean, I didn't actually use a piece of rubber in mine when I did it, and it did kind of squish it a little bit, something soft. I mean, I wish I could have, it didn't have to, happen the way it did, but, did need to thread it. If you, grab in here on like the actual circumference on this, it'll gnarl this up, which I guess is alright, but that means you need to like put a ton of super glue on that after you sand that down, because you're going to be taking off a ton of material. But yeah, it's really coming together. So and when it's all said and, well, obviously, the top of that is going to be keeping that in place. But I was just trying to do that for like an aesthetic look right there. Oh, let's hope I can get that out now. While it's chipping away paint off on the inside. That's okay. I gotta redo it anyway. From all the times of moving it around and about. Alright, so this time I won't push down. But when it's all said and done, this has about as much travel as the front. You got at least, because that ends up going in there like that, so you have at least 10 mils of travel for the strut too, just like you did for the front shock. All right, so hopefully you guys actually end up finding this informative. If you haven't watched my first video, I do have the websites in there, but see, I went to McMaster Car for some of the stuff. They got quite a bit of stuff. I went to micromaster.com. They have quite a bit of stuff on there. Let's see. Was it Model Car Garage? There's no, Model Cars Limited. I think that's what the other one was. Model Cars Limited. But yeah. So quite a number of sites I went to get the taps, the dies, the materials. I think this retaining ring I ended up getting from Fastenal. And, because I just put in Well, this is a 3/16 internal retaining ring. The other one was a 1/8, and then it's just a 1/4 inch axle cap nut, which I got from Lowe's, which you could probably also get them from Home Depot or whatever your local hobby store is, Ace, whatever it happens to be. And yeah, because everything's working out fine. These 2mm nuts and bolts up in here, like I said before, they're not completely fastened. I gotta try to see if I can get some either some super glue in there or use a thread locker. I would prefer not to use super glue, just in case I do have to tighten them back down. But that's why I try to do the thread locker instead in certain things, so that just in case I have to actually redo it. But the 2mm bolts do have to get cut down to length, just so that way it you know, doesn't hit anything. So I mean, as far as cutting the nuts down, you gotta play it by ear. You know, you gotta have something like a marker or something, so that way you can measure and mark the distances with the certain spaces that you have, and then mark it, and then and cut it, and then before you put it in there and try to see if you got enough space for the nut, make sure you can just rethread the end of that little bolt and get the nut on there beforehand. It won't take much, literally just a small pair of pliers holding, or you can even, sometimes, most of the time I can even do it just holding on to one end, and then just using the pair of pliers to slowly try and see if I can get that nut in place. And it usually works. So hopefully these videos are informative. If I happen to forget something as I've been rambling on here, I am sorry. Hopefully I can get the front shock, the one front shock and the one rear strut all in place, and then start on the other two here soon, so that way I can, have the video for you showing the what it finally looks like and how the final suspension ends up working. Which before I can do a final look on that, my next mod that I'm going to have to end up working on is the steering rack. So that was one of the other limiting factors on the suspension travel. So I'm going to work on that next, and it should help cause less breakage with the suspension. So alright, well, I guess that is all I have for this video for you guys. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down below. But other than that, as always, thanks for watching Brian's Builds.